Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Erica Oriens. I'm the Executive Director of the Michigan Center for Student Success at the Michigan Community College Association. It looks like we have a lot of people joining us now, right at 1 o'clock. You always panic when you host these Zoom meetings because at 12:59, there's no one here. So thank you all for joining us. I'm excited for our session today. I am delighted to be joined today by several of my colleagues at the MCCA, Jenny Schenker, Precious Miller, Brandy Johnson, and I want to send a special welcome to my newest colleague, Ashley Wisniewski. Ashley joined the MCCA on Tuesday, so this is her third day at the MCCA. She is the new Director of College Engagement, and she'll be working with all of you to facilitate your engagement in the work of the MCCA and support our collective work at the Center for Student Success. Our session today is one of the intersessions that we're having associated with the MCCA Leadership Academy. Many folks on the call today are part of the 6th cohort of the MCCA Leadership Academy, and we've been doing these intersessions with each of our cohorts that really are an opportunity for us to connect with the cohort in between our 2-day in-person sessions that we have about 4 times a year. And this year, we really focus these sessions on bringing in, or at least virtually bringing in, our national partners in work that we do in community colleges. So I am delighted to welcome to Michigan, actually a person who's I don't know how many times she's been to Michigan. Hannah, maybe you can count. But our friend Hannah Lahr from the Community College Research Center will be talking about some of her research on guided pathways and what they're learning from institutions across the country. We're also joined by 3 of our fabulous colleagues from all corners of the state of Michigan, David Darrow from Gogebic Community College, Ashley Van Heest from Jackson College, and Nathan Vensky from Kellogg Community College will be participating in a panel discussion about their work and really their leadership in implementing guided pathways at their own institutions. In addition to the Leadership Academy members for 2022-2023, you'll probably see some other faces on here. We've invited our Leadership Academy alumni to join us today as well. And we've also encouraged presidents and chancellors to invite us. And I bet some of you who we can't see your faces may be having a watch party on your campus, or hopefully are able to participate in this intersession together. On to some administrivia before I turn it over to Hannah. This session is being recorded. We will include the slides on the MCCA website where you went to register, and I'll put a link in the chat as well. And the slides should be available later today, and the recording should be up as soon as we're able to get that process, probably early next week. With that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Hannah to start our presentation today. Hannah?
Hi, everyone. It's great to see you all. Let me get my slides up. All right. So I am really happy to be here today and to talk about this Ask, Connect, Inspire Plan framework, which is really another way of thinking about and approaching guided pathways work. So very excited to talk about this. Feel free to put questions in the chat as we're going along. I will try to get to them at some point, and they might also help inform the panel discussion that we're going to have with David, Ashley, and Nate in a little bit. So I'm very excited to be here, and I'm just going to get into it. So Ask, Connect, Inspire Plan. This is really about program onboarding and how we can think about creating a more equitable program onboarding experience, and that will ultimately, hopefully, result in better longer term outcomes. So the idea here is, we are very concerned always about some of these longer term outcomes, completion, transfer, things like that. But to make improvements there, we need to start at the beginning. So that's why we focus on program onboarding. And I'm going to give some more details on that as we move through this presentation. For those of you who aren't familiar with CCRC, I just wanted to give you a quick little background. We are based at Teachers College. We are in New York City, and we pretty much exclusively study community colleges. And we are very interested in issues of access to post-secondary education. And we believe that community colleges are really uniquely positioned to promote equity and social mobility across the country. So we do a lot of research that we hope can also lead to guidance for institutions on strengthening opportunities and improving outcomes for students, particularly those from underserved populations. And I have colleagues at CCRC who do work more specifically on developmental education reform, advising redesign, workforce. So if you're interested in a topic, chances are we've done some work on it. So I would encourage you to go check out our website where we have a lot of great research papers and other resources that are available to you. So guided pathways. When I'm in person doing a presentation like this, I like a show of hands of how many people are familiar with the guided pathways framework, and in particular, these 4 pillars. I'm sure most of you are, but just to go over them briefly, since really the launch of the guided pathways work, we've organized the work around these 4 pillars. So clarifying the paths to student end goals, helping students choose and enter a path, keeping students on a path, and ensuring that students are learning across the program. And these 4 pillars are really focused on how colleges can change practice to support student success. And if some of you have probably done the scale of adoption assessment with Jenny and her team, which really gets into the details on some of the practices that are included across these 4 areas. So things like making meta majors and mapping all your programs of study and helping every student make an educational plan and reorganizing advising and thinking about those advising interactions and what advisors are talking to students about. Learning outcomes assessment, and then a big one is trying to move towards scaled experiential learning in all programs of study. So these are really these 4 pillars that we talk a lot about. And just to give you a little sneak preview, I'm really zeroing in on the 2nd pillar, helping students choose and enter a path today. So that's really where we're going to focus, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about why in a sec. So this guided pathways framework, these 4 pillars, they provide this research-based framework for redesigning colleges. And we've been talking about it lately in 2 ways. Guided pathways can help colleges increase equitable outcomes, but also build back enrollments. So across the country, enrollments have really been declining for more than 10 years since the kind of the Great Recession, 2009, 2010. They've been really steadily declining, and they've accelerated over the last couple of years, particularly among adult students. And community colleges are losing market share to public 4-year institutions. So we think that this guided pathways framework, and in particular, the focus on onboarding, can really help to address these issues of enrollment while also increasing some of the longer term outcomes like retention and ultimately completion. However, guided pathways is big and it's complicated. And for those of you who have done that scale of adoption assessment, are in the midst of this work, you know that there are a million moving pieces to any sort of guided pathways reform. There's things going on here, there's things going on here. And so we really want to try to help bring these ideas together. And so what we're suggesting is that in order to integrate a lot of the reforms that you have going on and to think about where you can have the greatest impact, we're really stressing that colleges focus on creating a more motivating and equitable program onboarding experience for all students. So again, this idea of starting at the beginning, if we can help more students be successful early on to meet some of these, early benchmarks, this will be really helpful for increasing some of those longer term metrics. So now quickly, quick interactive piece of the presentation. If you could all open up your chat and very quickly just tell me what your major was in college. Whatever it was, just put in what your major was in college. Mine was music, with a minor in Latin American studies. So, I played music since I was really young, went to music lessons, youth orchestra, did it all. And so when I went to college, I thought I should definitely just major in music because I like doing it. I did have a music teacher in 11th grade who asked me at one point what my backup plan was, because a career in music is hard, even if you're really good. And this gave me a lot of anxiety at the time, but I'm really grateful for it in the longer term because I went to college, I still majored in music, but I was also exploring actively other things that I was interested in and thinking about how some of the things that I was learning in music might help prepare me for other fields. So after I graduated, I worked at a music prep school. I organized outreach programs, and that eventually, then a wise person suggested I might be interested in a career in student affairs. That led me there, and that led me to CCRC. So that's kind of my path. So thank you for all sharing your major. And now the next question is, how did you decide on your major? What made you think that you wanted to major in English and sociology, human services, business, all of these things? Was it a great class that you took, an inspiring professor, an internship, or some sort of work experience that you did? What else? Maybe it was family suggestion, a friend suggested it. Let's see what we have. Inspired by a great teacher. The skill set seemed natural. Classes were fun. Wanted to get a good job. I just had to pick something. Yep. I was a junior and had to pick a major. Yep. So that definitely happens to a lot of our community college students as well. Think of all those students who they meet with an advisor and the advisor realizes they have like 75 or 80 credits and they're like, oh my God, we got to get you out of here. So we're going to give you that Associate of Arts in liberal studies. So there are a lot of influences here. And when we think about like, why do we choose a program of study? There's a lot of things that go into that. And I like to ask these questions because everyone comes to college with different interests, different goals, different ideas about their future. And for many people like me, there is not a direct line between their choice of major and what they end up doing. Pretty much everyone I work with, like no one majored in community colleges, very few of us thought we'd end up here. But we majored in things that helped us, we figured it out along the way. And more importantly, a lot of us had people who helped us to figure this out and gave us some guidance. And finding your passion usually doesn't happen by luck or by chance. So it's an important part of ensuring that students are successful and that they're inspired by what they're studying is helping every student have these opportunities to explore and think about their interests, their goals, their dreams, things they're good at, learn about different programs and learn about careers that maybe they didn't even know were an option for them. So that brings us to the Ask, Connect, Inspire Plan framework. And I realize that I have these posters behind me. I actually didn't plan this. They just live back there. And so they're perfect for today. But so I'm going to really talk about this Ask, Connect, Inspire Plan framework today. And as you can see, it's firmly in the second pillar of the Guided Pathways framework. So it is really about helping students explore, choose, and enter a program of study. And so this idea of program onboarding, that's really what we're focused on today. And ASIP is, I'll call it ASIP for short. It's different than regular onboarding into a college, which we all do, right? Like we all onboard students into the college. The focus here is on program onboarding. How can we help students explore, choose, and enter a program of study? So it's more specific, it's not general. And the other thing I want to emphasize is that this is a year-long process. So I want you to think of this as something that occurs over the course of the student's first year at college. This isn't something that's just going to happen at orientation, or it's just going to happen during the first week of school. This is really an ongoing process, and something that it's going to take a while to help students figure out their path. And we want to build in multiple check-in points, because students change their mind. Everyone changes their mind. And it's not really reasonable to expect that we're going to help them pick a program at orientation in their first week, and that's going to be it. Chances are they're going to want to change. So these frequent check-in points are really important. So why is program onboarding important? Just a little bit more. So, there's the 4 pillars. I would say that program onboarding, the second pillar, really lays an important foundation for pillars 3 and pillars 4, because you can't keep students on a path. You can't ensure that students are learning in a program if they're not in a program. And it also builds on the work of pillar 1. So many of you have probably done things like, or have been involved in developing meta majors, career and academic communities, those meta majors for your college. You've also probably been involved in doing a lot of program mapping. So laying out the course requirements for every program, the sequence. Usually we do like a, term 1, term 2, term 3, term 4. That's a really important piece of this, and it lays a really important foundation for program onboarding. And so the program onboarding work really builds on that. But to give you some data here, and this is national data, so it'll be different in Michigan, it'll be different at your college. These are really kind of useful metrics to use, and I would encourage you to, figure out what they are at your college, because there are some of these good like case maker data points. So the first data point I want to share is that about 40% of community college students complete any credential within 6 years of starting. And this includes certificates. So more than half of students, 60% of students, don't complete anything. So I would encourage you to figure out what this is at your institution. And if you can match your data to clearinghouse data, you can then look at like how many students transfer and complete a bachelor's degree as part of this as well. And as I said earlier, if we want to improve longer term outcomes like completion, we need to start at the beginning. We need to look at some of these early indicators. So one early indicator that's really interesting to look at is how many students apply to your college but never actually end up enrolling. This is a really interesting metric. It varies a lot by college. We estimate that nationally it's about 10 to 40% of students who apply don't end up enrolling, but I would, see if you can figure out what it is at your institution. And then the question is why. There are definitely going to be some students who applied with no intention to enroll. I've heard of some high schools where they just have all of the seniors apply to the local community college. So there's definitely going to be some of that. But what about some of the other students? And what is it about some of their early interactions, early engagements at the college that might not be motivating them to enroll? Maybe they're made to take a placement test early on, which is depressing, or maybe they just, their early interactions just aren't very, they're just not very engaging, and so the student never ends up enrolling. And then another metric, so this is fall to fall retention. About 45% of students leave higher education by year 2. So, and it's not that they went to another community college or transferred to a 4-year institution, they have left higher education. So I would encourage you to look at your fall to fall retention. You probably know what it is off the top of your head. And then disaggregate it by race, by income, by first generation status, and see what it is for different student groups at your college. And then ask yourself, why are they leaving? And one hypothesis that we have is that students are leaving because they don't feel like they're on a path to their goals. They don't feel like they're making progress to their goals. Students come to college because they have certain ideas in mind, they have certain goals. Many come because they want to get a job, they want to improve their lives, they want to make more money for themselves and their families. But in many colleges, when they come and they enroll, they take a placement test, they are put in developmental education, and maybe they're given a first semester schedule that includes Dev Ed Math, Dev Ed English, and a first year experience course. So they came to college thinking they were going to study business, psychology, something, but then they're not even able to access some of these courses because of prerequisites or other requirements, things they have to get done before they can even take those courses. So that's one reason why we think a lot of students might leave. And one thing I want to emphasize is that when we're thinking about program onboarding, we really need to think about how we can tailor supports to different student groups. So when I'm going through the Ask, Connect, Inspire plan framework and talking about that, I want you to think about how can we tailor this to different student groups, and how can we learn about what different students need so that we can provide them with differentiated supports. Some students are going to need more, some are going to need less, but how are we going to learn who needs what? And so that's a really critical part of the onboarding process as well. And the reason we talk about all students, we talk about scale and how can we scale practices and serve all students, is that even when we have some really powerful programs like TRIO programs are amazing, but they don't serve a lot of students, and they don't even serve all the underserved students that they could serve at your college. So if we want to improve outcomes for Black students, Hispanic, Latinx, Native, low-income students, we need to ensure that we're implementing practices that are going to benefit students regardless of whether they're in some of those targeted programs or not. So now a couple of thought questions for you. I wanted you to think about the typical student experience at your institution. So before we can think about what would we do, let's think about the current experience. And the status quo for a typical student will still apply. Probably unsure about their majors or careers, they might by default end up selecting an AA in liberal studies or general studies. Or they may pick a major that isn't necessarily rooted in their interests, and thus is also easy to leave. If you don't feel the connection to what you're studying, it's easier to leave. When students begin college, their orientation is often optional, right? And it often focuses on kind of a general introduction to college, registering for your first term courses. So it's kind of that, overall general onboarding to college, and it's not specific to them, and it's not about exploring careers and getting them into a program and helping them feel like they're making progress from the start to achieve their goals. And then a couple more questions. So thinking about the students who came into your college this fall, so in fall 2022, how much did you learn about their interests and goals? How much do you think you know about those students' goals and their interests? And do you think it's clear to students who entered this fall what they needed to do to achieve their goals? Do you think that they all feel like they know what courses they need to take, how long it's going to take, how they're going to pay for their courses, all of these things? Do you feel like that the current onboarding system at your college has set them up in this way? And then finally, what do you think are some of the longer term consequences, of these lack of early conversations? When I worked as an advisor, I think I saw this play out over time. When students aren't on a path early, they're not engaged early, then you can see over time, maybe they're not coming back to register for the next term. They don't seem as engaged, and when you don't see a path, it's again harder to see what the end is if you don't know what you're quite working towards. So some research we did with some community college students in Florida a couple of years ago, we asked them what they wanted in onboarding. And what we heard is that they wanted 4 things. They wanted assistance exploring academic and career interests. So really someone who they could talk to, who would have a conversation with them about their interests and their goals, who could help them learn about different programs and start to get on that path early. They wanted the opportunities to interact with other new and current students, faculty, and others who share similar academic and career interests. So feeling like you're part of a community of learners, people are interested in the same field, that was really important to students. Students wanted a chance to take a course on topics of interest to them in their first term. So again, moving away from a first term schedule that includes dev ed, math, English, writing, first year experience course, things like that, but really being able to take courses that are exciting to them and that they're passionate about in their first term. And then finally, assistance developing a full program educational plan. Students love to have educational plans because it shows them their path to their goals. And my plan is going to be different than Erica's plan because I can only take 9 credits a term. And so, but I can see my plan all laid out and I know it's going to take me 3 years, 4 years to finish my degree, but I'm going to squeeze in some summer courses as well so that I can try to make more progress. But Erica, her plan is going to be, 12 credits a term plus summer, plus a January short term, and she's getting in and out really quickly. So every student's plan is going to be different, but it's going to be based on those program maps. And I'm going to talk more about this in a second. So to achieve more equitable outcomes, colleges need to reimagine program onboarding. And we developed this Ask, Connect, Inspire plan framework to give you some ideas about how you could do this. One thing I want to emphasize, like most of the frameworks that we develop here at CCRC, these are based on our research. But they're frameworks. They're not going to tell you exactly what you need to do, but they are things that you can take and then contextualize to your college and innovate within these models so that you can think about what is Ask going to look like at our college? What is Connect going to look like here? And it's going to look very different at different colleges. Like it's going to look different at Gogebic than at Jackson and at all of these colleges because you look different and your students need different things and you offer different programs. And one thing I want to emphasize is that there's a role for everyone in this framework. So this isn't just for admissions counselors. It's not just for advisors, but registrars, financial aid folks, people who work in the library, deans, program chairs, all faculty members can find a role for themselves in the Ask, Connect, Inspire plan framework. And I think that's really important piece of this as well. So I want to go through Ask, Connect, Inspire plan quickly and just give you a couple examples. And then I'm going to invite David, Ashley, Nate to join in as well. And they're going to be able to give you a lot more examples of what this can look like. But Ask is when every student is engaged in an ongoing conversation about their interests, strengths, aspirations, and life circumstances with the aim of helping them explore programs of study, careers, and paths aligned with their goals. So one thing I want to emphasize on Ask is this isn't a one-time, what do you want to major in question, but this point of it being an ongoing conversation is important. And again, this gets at this idea that students are going to change their major, but we want to build in these check-in points so that they're not just changing it on their own, but they're changing it based on a conversation that they're having with someone at the college who can help them think through this and can help guide them maybe to a different program that might be a better fit. After we ask, we can connect. So from the start, based on what we learn about students from the beginning, we can organize opportunities for students to meet with faculty, students, alumni, employers, and other people in the institution who can help them access college and community resources that can support their needs. And this is really important for helping to develop the sense of belonging within an institution. At some larger colleges, this is really helpful as well because students can feel connections within a smaller program or a smaller field of interest and don't feel lost within a big institution or a big college. And we also know from research on retention and student support that when students feel like people know who they are, when they feel connections with people at the institution, they're going to be less likely to leave and they're going to be more likely to reach out when they need support and when they need help and when they have questions. Inspire is about helping every student take at least one course in their first term on a topic of interest that lights their fire for learning. So again, this is about moving away from an uninspiring first term schedule to a more inspiring one. And really any class can be a light the fire class. It's not that certain classes are going to be light the fire and some are not, but thinking about how can we work with faculty to help them connect their material to students' lives and their lived experiences, help them connect the course material to their programs of study so that they can see the relevance in some general education courses to their programs of study. So that's really what Inspire is about. And then planning is about helping every student by the end of their first term develop a full program educational plan that shows them a path to their goals. Again, this is going to look different for everyone, but it's going to show everyone their path and their plan to meet the goals, how long it's going to take, because every student is going to have a different timeline to completion. And these plans, like students' majors, are probably going to have to be updated. And so in addition to thinking about how we're going to help every student make a plan at the beginning, how are we going to help students update these plans as needed? So building in those check-in points so that if students are registering for courses not on their plan, someone notices and can help them update that plan. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead here for I'm going to give you one example of ask, and then before I invite the panel, I want to make one other point about onboarding. But this is just one example from Genesee Community College. They're in New York. And to facilitate this ask and to help really everyone get involved in doing this ask work for new students, they developed a list of questions. They call them their high five questions. And they gave them out to people who are talking to new students, and it gave them a tool and something they could use to start conversations so that, everyone felt like they were included in this and that they had some questions that they could use to start. And they also developed some questions for continuing students as well. And like Erica said, I'll share my slides and there's a couple of other examples in here, but I want to just jump ahead and make one other point before I invite our panel to join. So I've said this a couple times, accessing college level classes is part of onboarding redesign. It's really important. And co-rec reforms are critical, but they are not a silver bullet. So I just want to give a little bit of research on this because I think it's so important to think about developmental education reform, but also acknowledging that just doing co-rec is not going to be enough to improve outcomes. So I'm just going to take a couple seconds here to talk about the problems with pre-rec model. This is probably not news to most of you, but the majority of community college students are placed into pre-rec reforms if they are offered at a college. And usually that's because of the AccuPlacer test or something else that's used to kind of determine whether students are college ready or not. Women, low-income students, first-generation students, and students of color are overrepresented in pre-rec DevEd courses, and they fail to make students college ready. Instead, as you can look at this research, this is from a paper Tom Bailey and colleagues did a couple of years ago. But for students who are placed very low down on this sequence, very, very few ever make it through. And it's either because they didn't pass these DevEd courses or they just failed to enroll in the next class. So for several reasons, students are not progressing through this sequence. And of the students who are placed several levels down, a small percentage of them are able to access Gateway Math or English and pass Gateway Math and English. We did an evaluation of a co-rec reform in Tennessee, and this was one of the first quasi-experimental evaluations of this model because we were interested in whether this is increasing the percentage of students who are completing Gateway Math and English and whether it's increasing longer term outcomes. And you can see here, this is just some very simple descriptive statistics and some trend lines showing the percentage of students completing math. That's the turquoise line. English is the turquoise line. Math is the purple line, and then completing both is red. And you can see when they scaled co-rec reforms in Tennessee, this is across the 13 colleges in the state, there was a big jump in 2015. That's the year they scaled it, and we saw an immediate jump in the percentage of students who are completing those courses, which is great. But Tennessee didn't just implement co-rec courses, they also adopted math pathways at scale. And this looks a little crazy, but what this graph basically says is that when they scaled math pathways, the percentage of students taking algebra and calculus, algebra or statistics basically flipped. So the turquoise line here is an algebra calculus sequence. The darker blue line is stats. And when programs of study decided which math courses they wanted their students to take, it moved a lot of students out of algebra, which was a big barrier for many students getting through Gateway Math. So in addition to scaling co-rec, they also scaled this math pathways work, which doing those two together is what's really important. And you can see as part of this work, they developed co-rec courses for each math pathway. So it's not that, algebra, stats, and math for liberal arts all had the same learning support course, but they had contextualized support courses for each one of those pathways. A couple takeaways here. Co-rec models resulted in much higher rates of passing college math and English. Like that, you could see that on the trend lines, and we see that pretty much everywhere. The benefits of learning support were small, and the biggest benefits were just starting students in this college level courses. So what that means is that the co-rec is good, but what was better was just getting rid of the prereq debit. That was what mattered the most. And for math, if we look at the completion of Gateway Math, the biggest effect was in guiding students into math pathways aligned with students' program of interest. However, this is the big but, the students in co-rec performed well in subsequent courses, but they were not more likely to earn credits or to graduate in 3 years. So the big takeaway here, co-rec by itself is unlikely to improve overall student success, but it has to be part of broader reforms like guided pathways and program onboarding reforms, because we need to get students through those college level math and English courses, but then we need to provide more support to help them continue, ideally, in a program of study aligned with their goals and interests. That's what's going to help increase those longer term success rates. So co-rec is good, but it has to be embedded in these broader reforms. So with that, I'm going to pause. I'm going to take down my slides and invite Ashley, David, and Nate to join. All right. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. All right. Let me pull up my questions for you. All right. So quick introductions first. So we have Nate Bensky, who is the Executive Director of Industrial Trades Education, Workforce Solutions at Kellogg Community College. So welcome, Nate. We have Ashley Van Heest, who is the Assistant Dean of Strategic Initiatives and Director of Scheduling at Jackson College. Hi, Ashley. And David Darrow, who is the Vice President of Academic Services at GoGivic. And I think I finally learned how to say GoGivic. Did I? I did. Great.
Excellent.
Great. All right, cool. Thank you all for being here. So just to give everyone a little bit of context on why I invited Nate, Ashley, and David to join. So Ashley and Nate, I met in 2016 when we were working at Jackson College as part of the AACC Pathways Project, and they have led some incredible reforms at Jackson, and now Nate is at Kellogg. Really, it was before we came up with ASIP, they were doing a lot of ASIP practices. So they're going to talk about how they've done a lot of this work at Jackson and Kellogg. And then David was part of a team from GoGivic, who was part of our CCRC Summer Institute, where we talked about ASIP. And since the Institute, they've started incorporating this work into college practice. So he's going to be talking about that. So with that, I just want to talk first about some ASIP reforms you all have been doing, and then thinking about how can people on this call take some of these ideas back to their college? What would you suggest they kind of do first? But let's start with just some ASIP examples. So Nate and Ashley, Nate, I'm going to start with you. Can you talk a little bit about how at Jackson College you developed some strategies to help students as they're coming into the college share more about their interests, their goals with some of the navigators at Jackson, and then how folks use that. How did you use that information?
Sure. And thank you. So when we started doing this work, there was a lot of different things that were in flux at Jackson at the time. And it was really changing advising models, which also in the way we looked at it was, how do we ensure students are in the best situation to be advised when they came to their new student orientation appointment? And up to the day I even left Jackson, we were constantly tweaking and making adjustments to it. And that's something to be mindful of as you do this work. It's never done. It's just kind of what's the next iteration that you're going through. And we went through some ups and downs with some different models and trying different things. But as it relates to onboarding and intake, we started off with just a self-designed intake assessment. We took the 10-item personality inventory, the TIPI for the Big 5 personality assessment, and we combined that with the state of Michigan's their guided path, not they call it guide path, their pathways, and we took like acronyms and then we combined them together with the TIPI to make our own assessment that gave us a personality inventory as well as career outcomes, and we would use that to help guide conversations. That was one iteration, and as it continued to grow, when I left, I'm not sure if you still use it, Ashley can jump in here. There was Pathway U, which was, it did a couple different types of assessments to bring you in. And that way you can have conversations with students. You're not starting from scratch. And also on top of that, we started doing a new orientation prep work checklist, which then confirmed information that people put on their application. So a concern that we used to always receive, not always, but very often would be that, well, the information, we spend most of the time correcting the information from the application during the orientation appointment. And so a part of our process, the process at the time, was to confirm that information so students were in the best place to be technically, like actually advised when they showed up for their appointment. And we stopped even having orientations. We would just have new student appointments. And all that was built in through that process. Like what information can we get from students right away, and then get them to where they need to go in a program.
Thanks,
And
Nate.
As a heads up, I appreciate this. And my role here, like I don't do a ton with the onboarding and intake at Kellogg Community College right now, just for full transparency. So
that's okay.
I appreciate it. Bye.
Yeah, Ashley, so what would you add about onboarding at Jackson and really this idea of like learning more about their students, getting them connected, and then if you can also then talk a little bit about the planning process, because I think Jackson has done such good work on helping students make ed plans.
Sure, thanks. Everything that Nate said is correct and is still the way that we do things. We are still utilizing Pathway U as a tool. I think something to be mindful of when you're looking at doing things like this is just thinking about the placement of where each of these high impact practices lives. So it's been a challenge for us. It was, and it still is, of at what point kind of do you ask these really in-depth questions? Can you work it in at the time of the application? Does it happen at orientation? Does it happen at first advising appointment? Is it in your first year seminar course? And I suppose we're grateful to have all of those different options where we can be asking those things. But in terms of Pathway U, that now has been embedded into our first year seminar course, SEM 140 Seminar and Life Pathways, which is required of all students at Jackson College. The nice thing about Pathway U is it is contextualized to our programs of study. And so it just gives students a much deeper picture of what they are able to pursue at our institution. The prep work checklist, the NSO checklist that Nathan referred to, we had a lot of students that came in as accounting majors or welding majors because that was the first option on the list and the last option on the list. And no one wants to scroll through your 175 programs of study to pick one at the time that they're doing their application. But as we know, they have to, otherwise they won't get federal financial aid. So that was a challenge for the navigators at the time of our orientation. In terms of planning, because we do have mandatory orientation, which is really now just a new student advising appointment one-on-one that a student does with their navigator. Our academic advising model is called Student Success Navigator. So because we have mandatory orientation, we also have mandatory advising. So every student at Jackson College is assigned a Student Success Navigator. And we do have a technology tool that helps with this. We're a colleague institution, and we have a Lucian student planning as part of our self-service modules within that system. So we have a way to incorporate program maps, faculty designed program maps into that system. Students can log in, the navigator can log in, and there's a button that says load sample course plan, and it maps out the entirety of that student's program of study. And we facilitate that process, kind of the start of that process again in that first year experience course. I think it's important to really distinguish the difference between a program map and an educational plan. And that's the beauty of the Student Success Navigator model for us, and the way that we have that part of it implemented is that the navigator is able to have those one-on-one conversations with a student to turn that plan, or I'm sorry, to turn that map into that individualized plan. So if it is a student that only can take 9 credit hours a semester or only wants to attend part-time, every part of that map gets shifted around so that it lines up with what that student's needs are, including what their dev ed need is. So if they need that foundational statistics course first at the same time that they're taking college level statistics, we can work that into the plan at that time.
Awesome. And I also love that you make sure the plans are updated, and you've also tied them to registration so that students can just, look at their plan, register for courses. If it looks good, the navigators sign off, and if it doesn't look good, there's a conversation.
Yeah, because we have that mandatory advising model, students have to meet with their NAV before they can register for the next term. Students can only register for classes that their navigator has approved.
Yeah.
And that's not to say if they want to take a course that's off plan that they can't. But as Hannah said, it just means that there's a conversation that the student has with their navigator before that is able to happen.
Love that. Okay, so David, I want to turn it to you. One thing we talked about after the Institute was that you were really taking some of these ideas to work with high school students as well, which, that's a growing population at almost all community colleges across the country. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you're doing that, and then any other, ASIP examples that you wanted to share?
Certainly. We started as Hannah said, we started the Summer Institute. And even going before that, I had talked to Erica and Jenny, who gave me great input as to why we didn't have guided pathways here, what we could do, provided me with a lot of tools. So when we did our pre-work for the Institute, and if you haven't had a chance to do the Institute, I highly encourage it. One of the things I noticed right away that in our student portfolio, if you look at things that way, over a quarter of our students were high school students. We're experiencing a lot of MELT, whether it be dual enrollment, direct credit, or early college. And we knew that we had certain touch points with the students, but we weren't interacting enough. So kind of in the student engagement and admissions area, we came up with a course called COL 100, which is the college and career readiness course for sophomores in the area. And when I say area, imagine the state of Connecticut. Our service area is slightly bigger than that, and extremely remote, very, very remote. But this course was designed to work with sophomores in our Gogebic Ontonagon ISD, which included 6 schools. We ended up with 3 schools last spring. That was the first cohort that went through. Wakefield, Marinesco, Ewan, Trout Creek, and Bessemer. And to add to the distance here, they're also in 2 different time zones. We are in Gogebic County. We're one of the Michigan counties that are in the central time zone. And Ewan, Trout Creek is in the eastern time zone. So we offered it remotely. It was 3 college credits for the students. From the first cohort, I just was able to pull the data today. 47% from the first cohort as juniors are now in dual enrollment classes here. with an idea of where they're going. So that's very exciting for us. But the course really, the idea of the course is to help the students transfer to college by providing the information and addressing some, I guess we'll call them non-cognitive skills. But it also got them used to talking about careers and thinking about picking programs before they did dual enrollment, early college, or came here as freshmen. So we looked at study skills, time management, test taking strategies, setting goals, which, you know, if you're on a path, you want to make it to the end. Setting goals in terms of academics, transfer, and career goals. They did resume and cover letter writing, easy for me to say. But just a big focus on overall student success and wellness. They were prepped in our LMS Moodle, which my instructional designer is on here. Neither of us are fans of Moodle. But the advantage of the students who are here is they know how to use it and are into it, which helped them 2 years before they officially get here, in a sense. So we will run this again with 2 different sections this spring and continue that work. But the big question really almost starts with a career viewpoint in mind of what do you want to do? You know, what are you thinking about doing? What are your career goals, and how can the college or other avenues help you to get there? So it's a big part of that ask as part of the ASIP process.
Yeah, thanks, David. Nate, I want to turn to you for a second. So, you know, I talked a lot about how we need to learn a lot about our students, and this ASIP can be a way of like bringing students in, helping them feel connected from the start. And, you know, there's always going to be things that are outside of the control of the college. But how do you think, from your perspective, that we can use ASIP to provide students with the support that they need to be successful, regardless of, you know, where they are or what, you know, what their life has been so far, you know, when they come to the college?
Yeah, I think it, like, as you stated, it's a framework. And so I think part of the reason why, what I've been thinking about as you were doing your presentation and with that question is, I was fortunate enough to help coach some of the institute this summer, some of the schools, and there were some common questions that would come up. And I think that's important, not to directly answer the question, but get to the answer to the question. And that is, people see a lot of these implementations as change and just implementing something to say you're implementing it. And then I wrote another thing down in the program areas. So the ASIP framework, Ask, Connect, Inspire, Plan, is great. But if you have a program, so that would move to Inspire, let's say, you can connect and things like that. But if you onboard a student into a program that's just not put together well, and it's not engaging, and it's just totally staffed with adjuncts, and maybe you offer a class once every other semester, that's not going to inspire anybody. So I think there's a framework under the framework as we've been going through this to make sure that that framework can be successful. I think oftentimes we look at the ASIP framework and others within guided pathways, and it starts oftentimes with student services because that's where they can be the most flexible and make change. However, student services folks, so Nikki's on here from Kellogg. So let's say her and her team do an awesome job of asking, getting new structures in and connecting people to programs, but then they get into the Inspire piece in that first semester and the program's not run well. Well, that's a problem. So I just think that as we move forward with this work, we need to take a hard look at those foundational pieces to make sure that the ASIP framework can be as successful as possible. And I know that doesn't directly answer your question, but I know we don't have a ton of time, but that was something that constantly came up during the Summer Institute that I think would be valuable for people to know, that just by doing the ASIP framework and changing your onboarding is not necessarily going to change as much as you think it will, because if people are still not being onboarded into programs that are good, for the lack of a better term, and that lead to great outcomes, then you're not going to have the impact I think that's going to be desired, even if you make those student services driven changes.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it also can lead to a conversation about, you know, the content of programs and what programs are leading to as well. What are we preparing students for? And which students are entering which programs of study? I think these are all really important questions. that kind of build on your point.
So I know I didn't answer your question directly, but I want to take everyone's time. So
No, I think you did answer. I think you
Okay,
did.
thank you.
So I want to give people leave them with some like ideas for what they can do to take this framework. And like, maybe talk to their colleagues. I think that's a starting point for some of this work. So Ashley, what would you advise if you were gonna, suggest to another college about like, rethinking onboarding, thinking about ASIP, like where should they start, or what is the first thing they should do?
I think kind of to Nathan's point about so often doing something like this feels like change, or it feels like extra, or it feels like an add-on and like more work. I would recommend maybe looking at all of the parts of your process that you maybe feel like are not ideal, in a way that a framework like this can help you make them more ideal, that this isn't extra. We all do onboarding every day, as you mentioned already. So this isn't work that we're not already doing. I think if people start looking at the questions as well, they might identify, oh, well, yeah, I guess we do that. And we've got this good thing that we're doing, and we could look to scale this more, rather than feeling like you have to upend your entire system. Find some of those small wins where you're already doing this work, or some of the low-hanging fruit where it's work that you already know you want to revise. And I think starting small in some of those areas can help get and keep folks on board when you're looking at something that really can be this massive of an undertaking.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, because we don't want to, it's not a new thing, right? It's kind of looking at things you're doing in a different way, with this focus on onboarding to programs, this focus on scale, and also thinking about how we can support different students. David, what about you? What advice would you have? Or maybe you can speak from like after the Institute, you went back to the rest of your college and you talked about this. So what suggestions do you have?
Well, first I made everyone read Redesigning America's Community. I can't even say it with a straight face. If you haven't, check out Redesigning America's Community Colleges. Incredible book. And I really geeked out during the Institute. Serena Klippen was one of our coaches, but the other was one of the three authors of the books, Davis Jenkins, who is just incredible. Within the process of that, we all, the different colleges involved, did a TED Talk. And the team that we had at the college put it together. They made me present it, which, that's fine. But post that Institute, we shared versions of that at the beginning of the year, all staff meeting, a faculty meeting. I did something similar for our board of trustees. And then since we still have this strong connection, I also did it with the Gobik Ontonagon Intermediate School District, which is a big partner. So we did those TED Talks. We talked about it. I think really the key thing, and I cannot remember who said it, but I'd written it on my whiteboard in my office, and I don't think I'll ever be able to release it fully because I still see the ghost of it up there, is this is not an initiative. I think it's actually somewhat, you work at cross purposes if you call this an initiative, because all of you here know that community colleges often fall into the trap of starting 50 initiatives a year and wondering why we don't finish any of them. This is really kind of goes into what we do from marketing and recruitment to pre-orientation to orientation. And I was fortunate, just real quickly, the group I set up to do the Institute, and I'm relatively careful about how I plan my teams. I had our IR person, student services from the Houghton area, admissions, student engagement, faculty, and the registrar. And I am this week bringing the band back together with some different members, because some of those staff have already left in the year since we last met. But getting all those different groups, the one area I will be pulling in, is someone from our business services division too. Although really, with our past vice president of business, he goes, "How much is this going to cost?" I said, "Really, here's how much it costs if we don't do it." And he looked and he smiled. He said, "Just spend money." So I'm not sure the new VP will do that, but just having that group, because this really adopting guided pathways, or for us in our area, Davis Jenkins suggested we name it pasty pathways. You really need to involve everyone in the college at some level. And the people in that group will talk about guided pathways, but a lot of things we do, we don't even use that term. It's just, how do we engage the students? How do we engage the staff? You know, how do we make this just part of the inner workings of what we're doing? And I think the biggest example, I realize it's 1 o'clock and I'll stop talking. Biggest example this year that I saw was the way we changed orientation. We had faculty there, they're doing activities with the students. It was fun, it was engaging. They got to talk to students one-on-one in small groups. And that was a big change for this campus. So that was a very positive step forward on the C part there, the connect part. So, all right, thank you.
Hanukkah, I have 2 more minutes. I know everyone's
Sure.
jumping off. It's kind of go off of what.
Yeah, go for it, Nate.
And Ashley had to jump off, so I'm not taking her time. I just, to piggyback more off of what's been said by David and the experiences I've had over these years with coaching and then at Jackson, it's just, I used to oftentimes hear about barriers, that doing this is going to be a barrier. Having a student answer these questions is a barrier. This is a barrier. Some things are barriers, but some things are not. It's okay to have expectations of your students as they have to go through processes, so you can best advise them. You can best set them up for retention and success. I think oftentimes you hear barriers because people say that's going to hinder initial enrollment. That's typically what that means. When you hear that, when you talk about matriculation, this is a barrier. Well, listen, you're admitting a ton of students that are never going to complete your degrees or even complete a first semester successfully. So it's not a barrier. And I think it's important to know that if you reframe the way that you onboard students, yes, you may have a lower number of students who initially enroll, but the success of those students will probably go up. And it's okay, in my mind, to have those expectations. And what I do feel is like the people who do that says, hey, we're not going to let you enroll if you don't have financial aid set up 2 days before the start of the semester, so you get dropped in 3 days anyway. Like, we're not going to let you do that, right? And I think those are different types of expectations, where I've even heard that exact example be called a barrier. That's not a barrier. It's actually, you are doing students a disservice, in my opinion, by allowing them to do that, because you know that there's no chance they're going to be able to get that stuff done in order to even move forward in the semester anyway. So I just think that reframing what those questions are, and also changing processes and internal processes that maybe don't drive success in the name of getting an initial enrollment. And I think if we start using that as a barometer, is this truly helping students be successful? Then I think we can cut some of that crap out, where you're just worried about initial enrollment as opposed to like long-term persistence and retention, and then whatever their end goal is. So.
Yeah, I totally agree, Nate. I think that's a really important point. And if some of these things are just like the expectations from the start, then, people will do them. And I don't think it, making advising mandatory is a barrier either. But I say that as a former advisor. So thank you, Nate. Thank you, David. And thanks to Ashley, who had to jump off. Sorry we ran a little bit late. I'm going to turn it back to Erica, but thank you both so much for being here. And thank you all for joining today.
And thank you, Hannah. I appreciate it. I think such outstanding work that you're sharing. Appreciate David, Nathan, and Ashley as well. I am looking forward to seeing our Leadership Academy Fellows at Lansing Community College West Campus on January 19th and 20th. And I am excited for us to debrief this session as well and talk about really, in my work with lots of colleges across Michigan, the incredible amount of leadership it takes to implement a lot of these practices and how difficult it really is. And so thank you to all of you who've done this outstanding work, and I'm looking forward to seeing our fellows in January. Thanks a lot. Have a great afternoon.